our golden anniversary.
So, what did you get us? Gold earrings?
A gold necklace?
Or just a good old-fashioned gold bar?
We're not picky.
Thanks for 50 fabulous years of radio at Nassau Community College.
The voice of Nassau Community College.
This is the award-winning 90.3 WHPC HD Garden City.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Play WHPC.
And available on Odyssey, TuneIn, iHeart, and on the WHPC app.
90.3 WHPC.
Meet the Flintstones, have a family. I screwed the lyrics up, brother.
What?
I screwed the lyrics up in the beginning. How many Flintstones episodes have I seen in my lifetime?
Thousands.
And I screwed the whole open.
You still watch them probably 3 times a day.
Well, they were on May TV at 6 o'clock in the evening, and now they're on just Sundays.
The Flintstones?
Yeah.
I watch MASH at 7 o'clock.
That's me.
7
6
o'clock.
o'clock.
Yeah.
They used to be on.
You just said me.
Yeah, Me Television.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the Flintstones were at 6, right before MASH.
I'm watching the news at 6.
Yeah, well. Anyway, welcome to another edition of From the Press Box. I am Rob Leonard. Joining me, of course, is my brother and award-winning sports writer, Tim Leonard, as we talk sports every Monday.
How you doing?
From 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. This show becomes a podcast later on Spotify and Spreaker and all the rest of them. We will be talking to Pat Calabria about the passing of truly, Tim, one of the greatest hockey players ever.
One of the greatest goal scorers, absolutely.
And
Mike Bossy.
And we got to watch him on Long Island.
Exactly.
So
exactly.
We were talking to Pat about 9:30ish or so. And, of course, Pat, of course, was the beat writer for Newsday during the Dynasty years, which was a great time to cover any team.
Great time
Dynasty years.
Cover a team, great time. Hey, and for anybody who may not have seen it, Pat wrote a tribute to Mike Bossy in yesterday's Newsday.
Right.
It was just outstanding.
Yep.
Absolutely outstanding. And that's the kind of article that you don't get unless you're there.
Yep.
And, that's I try to explain this to people when they ask what's wrong with journalism these days. And the thing that is absolutely what's wrong with it is that nobody values experience anymore. And people just say, we'll just hire somebody out of college. And these people I remember what I was like out of college. I was clueless. You need to put in some years, and you need to get the experience, and you need to get to know athletes, and especially the athletes you're covering. But you need to learn how things are done. And
yep.
Pat was at the peak of his game back when he was covering those Islanders teams, and the Islanders were certainly one of the great franchises of all time when they were winning 4 Stanley Cups in a row and winning a record 19 straight playoff series.
Which will never be topped again. We know that for a fact. Say it and don't even try to stop me. By the way,
you, brother.
Today is tax day. It wasn't the 15th Friday because it goes into Saturday, and God forbid, brother, that the post office isn't open on Saturday, even though they are open on Saturday. But I guess some post offices aren't open on Saturday. So technically today is tax day.
Yes.
At 11:59 p.m. If you haven't done your taxes yet or haven't delivered them like me,
get on it.
We have to get on it. Also, brother, there's another thing.
Make sure you find a post office that's open till midnight.
Or travel up to Boston.
Huh?
Because it's Patriots Day up there in Massachusetts.
That's why you don't travel to Boston today.
But I'm saying is, if you said, well, I'm in Boston, and I mailed them from Boston tomorrow, they'd be okay. Because today, it's Patriots Day, the Boston Marathon's happening.
Oh, so what you're saying is that Boston's tax day is actually tomorrow.
Right. Yeah.
All right, well, you got to say that.
Well, I was about to, and you cut me off like you always do. So anyway, a lot of things happening in today's show. Let's start off. I don't know. I think the Mets are the big story first, but the Nets are in the playoffs, Eastern Conference, Game 1.
Playoffs top everything, brother.
Against the Celtics yesterday. Truly one of the greater games we've seen in a while for the Nets and in the NBA in general, really, if you think about it. It's just an exciting game.
Yes.
It was something to like sit down and say, well, I don't really like basketball, but this is a good game. So I mean, let's be honest, the Nets should have won. The last points,
100% correct.
The last basket the Celtics got was like, I don't want to say pure luck, but it was pure luck. It was pure luck.
I mean, here's my immediate reaction as soon as the game was over. And just to recap for anybody who may not have seen the game, Jason Tatum makes a cut to the basket, takes a pass, I believe it was from Marcus Smart, and spins around Kyrie Irving, who made the mistake of trying to reach around Jason Tatum and knock the ball away instead of standing where he was, which probably would have resulted in a charge. And Irving tried to poke the ball away and never touched Tatum. Tatum spun and put up a layup. Literally, the ball hit the glass, and the red light that are built into the backboard went on to say, all right, no time left. But the ball was up already. Ball drops through the basket, easy layup, game's over. And my immediate reaction as soon as that happened, besides profanities, were how does a home team like the Celtics and the higher seed, how does that home team steal the first game at home? Because that's what the Celtics did yesterday. Then they had no business winning that game with the fourth quarter that the Nets put up, but that's what happened. The Celtics were able to steal that game. And part of the problem was that the Nets were very sloppy to begin the second half. I thought they relied a little bit too much on the three-point shot, but Kyrie Irving was hitting them in the second half. So, and that's actually what got the Nets back in the game. But I would have liked to have seen the Nets try to get inside a little bit. Kevin Durant didn't have a good game yesterday. He scored 23 points, but he was 9 for 24 from the field, which is well below his usual output. And he was the one that missed the shot that allowed the Celtics to come back down court for that final game-winning layup, and missed a three-pointer.
Yep.
So it was, if to me, especially with KD, as great as he is, if you're struggling with your shooting, try to get to the basket. Why are you taking a three-pointer? It didn't really make a lot of sense to me when it happened, especially the Nets were up 1. So why are you taking a 3? There was no reason for it. Try to get a basket, and then what's the worst that happens? If the Celtics make a 3, then the game is tied. But you need to make a basket there. The other thing that just aggravated me was early in the second half, the Celtics jumped out to, it was around a 10-point lead. I don't remember the exact score. But there was one possession where the Celtics scored. Kyrie Irving takes the ball under the basket and is going to inbound it. All 4 Nets went down court. So he's got nobody to throw the ball to. And 2 Nets players realized when they were 3/4 of the way down court, hey, somebody must have yelled at him, like, we got nobody down here. So they go running back, and before Kyrie gets a 5-second call on him for not inbounding the ball quickly enough, he just flings the ball in the direction of one of his teammates. Well, here comes Marcus Smart, intercepts the pass, and takes 2 dribbles and throws down a thunder dunk that sends TD Garden, Boston Garden, whatever, the amateur Garden. It just went nuts. And you can look at that play and that one bit of stupidity and lack of focus. Well, there's your game. The Nets lost by a point.
That's right.
So you can't let that happen. You can't switch off like that. There's got to. I mean, I don't know who the normal player is to inbound the ball, but somebody's got to stay back. You can't just have 4 guys running up court. Kyrie can't inbound the ball to himself.
Right.
So I mean, there were issues yesterday, and you can talk all you want about the last play, but really when the Celtics went up big in the third quarter, it forced the Nets to really have to exert a lot of energy to get back in the game. And like I said, Kyrie shot the lights out. He scored 39 points, and flipped off the Celtics fans more than once. We'll get to that in a minute, but Kyrie played a great game yesterday. And I'm not the biggest Kyrie fan in the world, but he played a great game yesterday, and it would have been nice if even one of his teammates could have played a great game along with him, because if they had, the Nets would be up 1-0 right now instead of down 1-0, and we're talking about the difference in that being a split second.
Yeah, literally. I mean, it just shows that during the middle of the game, you miss a couple of baskets, it can affect the game.
Can't switch off. You can't switch off in the NBA. You can wind up, and it happened yesterday. You can wind up with very devastating consequences, and that was the issue. It's just. I mean, I was screaming when that happened, because it's something that's so basic in the NBA. And you never see it. You never see all four players. And at some point, shouldn't somebody who's running down court have taken a look around and say, why am I running with four guys?
Yeah. Well,
that means there's nobody back there, and we're all on the other side of the court. We're all past half court. We're all almost to the 3-point line at this point. Like, somebody should have realized what was going on. If nobody else, Steve Nash should have been screaming at somebody.
Right. But you know what you do? If that ever happens again, you throw the ball at your basket. You throw it as hard and far as you can and try to hit the basket.
Well, I mean, basically, he should have called timeout.
Well, he should have called timeout.
I mean, that would have been. I mean, it would have been a horrible timeout to waste, because it's basically wasting a timeout. But at least you don't lose a possession.
Yeah, you don't want to lose the possession.
So
I totally agree with that. It's just it's one of those things where the clock's counting down, and he's probably saying, "Where the hell is my guys?"
Well, I'm sure he was saying. I'm sure he was probably yelling at his guys too, like, "Hey, look, I'm back here, somebody."
Yeah.
But that was a big issue. Kyrie also, the big issue. Everybody knows he's hated in Boston. He wanted out. He wanted out of Cleveland. He went to Boston. He hated Boston. Couldn't wait to get out of there. Celtics fans will never let him forget, and especially now when he's playing for a good team in Brooklyn. The New York, because Boston will always have that second-class city mentality when it comes to anything New York.
True.
My Mook friend Croce is proof of that on a daily basis.
But brother, they had to change the name of their arena. Remember it was the Boston Garden, and then they moved to the Fleet Center, if you remember.
Right.
And then they didn't like that, so they said, well, we'll still call it the Garden, but we'll call it the TD Garden.
Well, that's a different bank. That's why. It's different banks. Or did Fleet become TD? I don't even know.
But, they had to go back to the Garden. They never should have not called it the Garden.
The Fleet Garden?
No, well, why not? It's all sponsorships anyway.
I don't know.
It's all about, they were trying to sound newer. Instead, but what they do, they grabbed the old floor where they moved.
Of course.
But,
So, but anyway, the fans were giving it to Kyrie yesterday. Kyrie at one point made a 3-pointer, and the longest of the right fingers came up and gave the crowd a little salute. And then at one point he was standing on the sidelines waiting to inbound the ball, and the crowd was giving it to him right behind him. And he kind of like tapped himself on the back of the head, and you couldn't see it on the camera shot, but apparently he was double birding at that point. And you saw reactions on people's faces on TV, and I was watching it at that point. I'm like, it didn't even cross my mind, though, at that point. Like, did he just do that? But obviously he did, because, like I said, the crowd reaction, you could see it was like, wow, like, what's going on? Kyrie said after the game that he was returning the energy that the crowd was giving him, which, I'm not going to sit here and say I have a problem with it, because fans have become really emboldened, especially since COVID, and we've gotten fans back in arenas and stadiums and whatnot. Fans have become much more aggressive and much nastier. And if you remember, right after fans were allowed back in arenas, and there was immediately, like the first week or week and a half in the NBA, there were, I think it was 3 or 4 fans who were ejected from arenas for throwing stuff at players.
Right.
For, just the abuse. There was a water bottle that was thrown. Somebody threw popcorn, like a full bowl of popcorn, like one of those big tubs. Threw the whole entire thing at a player. Which,
well,
it's not going to hurt him, but it's still, what are you doing?
They probably had the ability to refill it, so it probably didn't.
Only my brother would think of that. But anyway, the fans have been getting nasty, and I kind of thought that it was over last year, but obviously it's not. But yeah, Kyrie definitely gets a different level of vitriol when the Nets go to Boston. So I mean, will there be a fine? Yeah, there will be a fine. And when I say there will be a fine, that will be for Kyrie, not the Celtics fans. But what are the Celtics doing to I don't know, to make the arena, I don't know, safer, friendlier? Do you want the home court advantage? Of course you do, but there should be a level of, I don't even know how to put this, but there should be a level of you should be able to be a fan, yes, and yell at Kyrie, try to take him off his game. But when you start blasting profanities and I'm assuming nothing racial was screamed at him, because otherwise I'm sure we would have heard about it in the press conference. But there was a reporter yesterday who was asking Kyrie about the aggressiveness, or he was talking about what was happening from the fans and what he was giving back to the fans, and Kyrie kept saying, well, that's not the right word, and he kept correcting him on the word that the reporter was using until they finally kind of came to an understanding. But Kyrie was very matter of fact about it. He said, look, I'm just giving them back what they're giving me.
Well, that's what you expect him to say, and you're right about fans. God knows I've been to Met games when John Rocker was shooting his mouth off at that time, and I remember he comes running out of the bullpen at Shea, and literally you see batteries just missing him because they weren't thrown ahead; they were thrown behind him.
He was on a dead sprint,
and he was on a dead sprint, and you just saw batteries being thrown. Yeah. And none of those people got thrown out. Maybe today they'd catch him because there's so many cameras now in the stadium. It's much easier to catch him.
And as much as Rocker deserved the hatred of Met fans,
of course,
you don't deserve to have batteries.
No, you don't want a battery thrown at your head or your
exactly.
Even if it hits your hand. I mean, it can,
if it hits anything, it's going to open up cut.
Right. So you're
going to bleed if a battery hits you. You
have to have a certain amount of respect, even for your diehard hatred of whatever team or player.
Rivals.
It's Ranger fans and Dennis Potvin are never going to make up.
No.
But he's not also playing anymore, so it's
hasn't been for decades.
It's like if I don't know if Potvin's still doing play by play, not play by play, but he was the color commentator.
Was he working for the Panthers?
He was working for the Panthers, but imagine you see him at the Garden walking around. He's in at the beginning of before the game starts, he's just walking to the.
It wouldn't surprise me if he was.
But a Ranger fan wouldn't go up and say, you're a moron, you suck, something like that.
He might. He might. I wouldn't be surprised if a Ranger fan walked up to Potvin and screamed at him, "You suck."
Yeah.
But the thing is, that Ranger fan would probably be so younger than when the incident happened that caused the chant to be created. So, I mean, that's the other issue is that, you have this is ingrained in people. That being said, though, now that I'm thinking about what I just said, I'm not even sure the Ranger fan would recognize Potvin if it was that young. He might not even know. It's just the Ranger fans chant. So, I mean, no matter how much you hate a player or a team, there has to be a certain level of just humanity. I mean, I'm all for getting loud, telling just voicing your opinion on a team, even if that opinion is, hey, you suck. But there has to be a limit to it.
Yeah.
And the Celtics fans probably went over that line yesterday. But again, like I said, to me, it's almost like if it doesn't get racial, then
it shouldn't get racial.
A lot of stuff isn't over the line.
No, I agree with that.
Keep families out of it and keep race out of it, and the rest of it, I mean, that's what home court advantage is about. You want to try and take the guy off his game, but that being said, Kyrie scored 39 yesterday.
Right.
They didn't take him off his game; they made him better.
Okay, let's go. I'm talking to Pat Calabria in about 10 minutes. Talking about the career and memories of Mike Bossy. Of course, Pat was the Islanders beat writer for Newsday during the Dynasty years. Let's quickly talk about the Mets brother, Jacob deGrom. I don't know where he watches the games.
He's down in St. Louis. He's working out there. He's working out. He's doing whatever rehab he can do. He's not throwing the ball still.
He can. What's he going to do? Wait.
He had an MRI a few days ago, I think. But he came up to New York for the home opener, so he could be introduced and get an ovation and then go back to St. Lucie.
Well, let's talk quickly about. They're 7-3 right now. They're leading the NL East, which is incredible.
They're almost to a point there where they're getting close to running away with it, brother. This is like last year all over again. Right now, the Mets are the only team in the National League East who are above 500.
Right, and we'll take it. As I said last year, until the Mets imploded, choked, whatever word you want to use. The Mets were in first place, and I don't care how they got there, and I would have taken if they made the playoffs, just
but
being the best team out of the worst.
Much like the Mets are right now, those Mets that you're talking about were about 4 games over 500, today's Mets are. The big difference with this year's team, Chris Bassett, the guy who the Mets traded from the Oakland Athletics, he's been outstanding in 2 starts. Tyler McGill, who ostensibly is the replacement for DeGrom, he has been DeGrom-like in 2 starts. So he's been outstanding. Both of these guys have ERAs under 1. Even Carlos Carrasco pitched 5 scoreless innings against the Diamondbacks on Sunday. Carlos Carrasco, who was terrible last year. Met fans not only wanted him traded, I think they wanted him shot. But his ERA is under 1. He's pitched phenomenal. 2 games, he's been phenomenal. He's allowed 1 run in 11 plus innings. So, despite the fact that Max Scherzer has been kind of pedestrian, he's pitched 2 games. His ERA is like 3.8 or something like that. Despite the fact that DeGrom hasn't pitched at all, and Max Scherzer has been, decent, not great, not $43 million worth. No. But the Mets are 7-3, and the Mets are winning games. They're scoring runs. They're putting. Pete Alonso's been phenomenal. Robinson Cano's hitting home runs. Starling Marte so far so good. There's a lot to like. And Buck, I said it last week. I like where Buck has this team. They're prepared. They're getting it done situationally. It's just right now the Mets. They're kind of a fun team to watch. They seem like they know what they're doing on the field. Well, and that's all you can ask.
Well, I also think, and I'm not a huge fan of Buck, as you know.
I don't know why.
I think because he tends to burn out his team, and maybe he gets one good year, but he's never won the World Series. So
that's true.
So
he's got depth. So I don't know, when you say burn out his team, he's got a lot of depth. So he's going to be able to move guys around. He's going to be able to play Jeff McNeil and Cano and get Alonso some reps at DH and get Dom Smith at first base and outfield. So he's got a lot of different guys that nobody is going to have to play every day.
Right.
And I know a lot of guys want to play every day, but they're going to be able to take breaks that should lead to fewer injuries. And, right now, obviously for us, it's a week-by-week thing because we do our show once a week. But so far in 2 weeks, I like everything I've seen about the Mets. There is nothing that, when I look at this team, and I can say, wow, that's a weakness. Because so far there hasn't been. The pitching's been outstanding. The hitting has been very good. Not overwhelming, but very good. They played the Diamondbacks, which is a team they should beat, but the Yankees played the Orioles and lost 2 out of 3. So you win those games. That's the whole point when you play a team that isn't so good, is you take 2 out of 3 or you sweep and you move on to the next one.
Right.
But the Mets have played 3 series. They've won 3 series. So
they're playing well. I give them credit.
Mets fans should have no complaints.
They had opening day this past week, and finally, the statue for Tom Seaver gets
look good. Good statue.
First of all, it's a good statue. He doesn't look like he's angry. Like they did a Lucille Ball statue a few years ago, and she looked like someone from Walking Dead.
Well, the famous Cristiano Ronaldo statue, which didn't even look like him.
Well, this one sort of looks a lot like Seaver, and it's also got. The beautiful part is it's got that thing where his knee is touching the ground almost.
Almost, yeah. The drop and drive, as they call it, brother.
And that's how I remember Tom Seaver.
And they pointed out on the broadcast the grip on the baseball.
Yeah,
curveball.
Yeah. It's funny, brother. Years ago, Tom Seaver was over at Steiner. I guess had a store at the Roosevelt Field. I don't know if he still does, but he did at the time, and it was Cleon Jones and Tom Seaver. And I'm like, I'm going to go get Tom Seaver's autograph. And it was a lot more money than I wanted to pay.
Probably pricey, yeah.
And I was like, oh, geez. And I didn't want to get Cleon Jones without getting, and so I didn't get Cleon Jones either, but I wanted to get Seaver, and I didn't get Seaver because the picture they had was not the picture I want him to sign. I want him to sign a classic Tom Seaver picture. This is some picture they looks like they found like in the secondhand store or something. So I didn't buy it. It was $100 and I don't want to say the amount, but it was a lot of money.
It was over 100.
Yeah, it was. And I was just like, wow. And I just, to this day, I wish I'd gotten that autograph because obviously, we never got it, or I never got it. I've had Cranepool's autograph,
Yes. So do I.
And I have...
So did every kid on Long Island growing up around when we did.
Yeah, well,
Ed Cranepool did a lot of appearances.
He did a lot of those clinics, as they used to call them. Anyway, let's talk about... did they do something for Gil Hodges also? I thought they did... I'm trying to find it. I thought they did something for Gil. Gil's going into Hall of Fame this year. I know they had a press conference.
They should.
Yeah, before that, sometime this past weekend.
They should do. And the Mets named the press box for Jay Horowitz.
That's right.
Long-time PR guy. Who's
still alive, we should say. We wanted to have him on, but COVID happened. He wrote a book. I'm not sure how many...
Long time ago.
I'm not sure how books he sold because of COVID, but he did put out a book.
It's pretty good, too. I read most of it. I didn't read all of it, but I read most of it.
Anyway, quickly, brother, the Yankees... are not playing the way the Yankees are known to play, brother.
Frustrating, brother. Frustrating. The Yankees right now are looking like last year's team, which is not a good thing. That's this is a team that, again, so far they're 5-5. It's only 10 games, small sample size. I know all the words, but the Yankees don't seem to score if they don't hit home runs, and you're not going to hit home runs all the time. You got to be able to put some hits together. And when you lose 2 out of 3 to the Baltimore Orioles, that's a bad thing. And I will remind you that the Red Sox and the Yankees finished tied last season, but the Red Sox wound up with a wild card game. Now, a big reason for that was because the Red Sox had a far superior record against the Orioles than the Yankees did. Now, they finished with the same record, but you need to win those games against the lousy opponents in the American League. And losing 2 out of 3 to the Orioles is not the way for the Yankees to better their situation, let's say. I mean, I don't know if they're going to win the division. I still think the Blue Jays are the team to beat in the American League East. But to be able to compete with the Blue Jays and or be one of the wild card teams, the Yankees need to take at least 2 out of 3 from the Orioles. I mean, they lost 5-0 yesterday. How do you not score against the Orioles? That's just unbelievable. Imagine
you're a fan of the Orioles all these years and how bad they've been.
They're awful.
They're just.
I feel bad for their fans because we have some cousins who are fans and they're waiting because the Orioles have some good players in the minor leagues. They're going to be better within 2 or 3 years. I'm telling you this right now. Without a doubt, they're going to be better. I don't think they're going to contend for a pennant unless they actually start spending some money and surround those players with good players. But there are players in the minor leagues. The Orioles have 2 of the top 10 prospects in baseball right now. So when those guys get to the major leagues and get themselves established, the Orioles will no longer be a laughingstock. But they're still 5 years away from being a competitive team.
That's horrible.
So.
They don't get angry in Baltimore the way they do here in New York.
Because the owner is an idiot. That's why. The owner's a clown. He's not spending money. He's all he's doing is just pocketing what people like coming to that ballpark. It's still a nice ballpark, despite the fact that it's been around for years. But it's still one of the real nice ballparks in America. And I wouldn't mind going, but.
Well, you know what, brother? We'll go down for Yankees,
exactly.
And we'll then visit the Cousins.
Exactly.
Since they're literally 4 feet away from there.
Well,
we're going to take a break right now. You're listening to From the Press Box right here on 90.3 WHPC. We're going to talk to Pat Calabria and talk about Mike Bossy, remembering Mike Bossy, right after this.
Radioactive. It's Big Ed inviting you to join me Mondays from 10 till noon for the Good Gold Show. We've got the greatest hits of all time, all your faves of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. A whole lot of fun, and we'll keep you informed. Plus, we'll take your requests and your dedications.
Playing favorites.
So join me Mondays from 10 till noon for Good Gold on 90.3 WHPC, available on the Odyssey, iHeart, and WHPC apps.
Frank Sinatra,
Bing Crosby,
Ella Fitzgerald,
Dean Martin.
Hey guys, what are you doing?
We're making a list of artists you don't hear on the radio anymore.
Wait, I know where you can hear all of them and more.
Where?
Right here on Standard Serenade. Join me, Glenn DeMilth, for 2 hours of great songs by the great stars. Saturday afternoon at 5 on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
Okay.
Go. Tell your friends about the Nassau Morning Madhouse. Hear what you're missing.
Check it out.
Check it out.
We're going to be talking about a time where you had to lie to your significant other.
She doesn't know I lied about this stuff, so if she ever hears this, I die. Have you guys ever been in one where someone drops the L word too early?
Yes.
And you don't know what to do?
I thought you were saying lesbian. I am so sorry.
I've been lesbian. I've been there. I've been there.
Wait, you were the lesbian too? The lesbian's listening like, how dare you?
It wasn't lesbian.
I know.
So you dropped the L word too early, right?
Why are you guys obsessed with calling your significant others losers?
Wow.
Oh, I get it.
Oh my God.
The Nassau Morning Madhouse. Weekday mornings from 7 to 9.
Yeah.
On the voice of Nassau Community College.
90.3 WHPC.
The views expressed on air are not necessarily those of WHPC, its management, or Nassau Community College. Responsible opposing viewpoints will be considered by emailing them to whpc@ncc.edu or by mail at WHPC 1 Education Drive, Garden City, New York 11530. Thanks for listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
I've paid my dues time after time. I've done my sentence, but committed no crime. And bad mistakes, I've made a few.
Oh, if you're an Islander fan, you know that song. Heard it for 4 straight years. With Islander captain Dennis Potvin holding the cup up. One of the greatest players, brother, we've ever seen. Passed away last week. We talk about Mike Bossy. And a man who knew him, covered him. Pat Calabria, formerly of Newsday, is joining us. Thank you, Pat, for joining us. Talk about Mike Bossy. Truly one of the great players ever. Hold on, what happened here?
There we go.
I'm sorry, we had a little cut off at the beginning. Now we got you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Not only do the statistics bear that out, but, anybody who ever saw him play knew he was arguably the greatest right wing of the, last 50 or 60 years.
So true.
Without a doubt.
And maybe the most humble player we've ever seen in sports, not just in hockey. Just a humble guy.
He was not one to tout his own accomplishments. The one exception, I would say, is, and he put himself out there challenging himself to score 50 goals in 50 games. I mean, it's not something anybody had ever really thought about. Maurice Richard had done it way back when. And Mike just said, I think I'm going to try and score 50 and 50. He challenged himself.
Was that? I mean, I actually wanted to talk to you about that. But was that something that he brought up, or because it just kind of came out of nowhere? I'm just going by memory from this, but all of a sudden it was Bossy saying I'm going to score 50 and 50, and I remember my initial reaction was, okay, but why?
He absolutely brought it up. It's not something that anybody said do you think you could score 1550? I mean, he just brought it up, and he was his childhood was just outside of Montreal, so he knew the name Maurice Richard, knew about the 50 and 50, and like I said, that was entirely his creation.
I mean, it wound up being one of the signature achievements of his career, and like you said, he was the one who put it out there. But I remember the game, because I was watching the game where it was the 50th game, and he still needed 2 goals. And when he got the second goal, it was such a celebration. I don't recall ever seeing Mike Bossy celebrate a goal like he celebrated that 50th goal.
Yeah, I mean, the goal is etched in my memory. Of course, I was at the game, covering the game. He scored from the left side of the ice, and immediately turned, and he was dancing on his skate and pumping his stick up in the air. And in those days, the players were allowed to come off the bench to celebrate. They're not allowed to do that anymore, and the entire bench came off the ice. But I remember him dancing on his skates, absolutely.
Yeah.
To me, Bossy had 3 signature goals. One was that one. 2 was the goal he scored in Game 3 of the sweep of Vancouver in the 82 finals, when the only thing touching the ice was his stick. He was in midair when he scored the goal. And the 3rd was in the first game of that series, which the Islanders won 6-5 in overtime. They were in the first overtime, and the first overtime was ticking down. And Harold Snepps, the big Vancouver defenseman, had the puck along the boards behind and to the right of the net. And with just seconds left, for some inexplicable reason, he tried to get the puck out instead of just holding it against the board and going into a second overtime. So he tried to get the puck out, and it came out to Bossy in the right circle, and Mike one-timed it past the goalie with 2 seconds left in the first overtime.
Yep,
to me, those are the to me, that was those are the 3 goals that I remember.
I mean, the second one, like you said, when the only his stick was on him, and the guy, people remember the Bobby Orr goal when he did that, and you see him, doing like kind of a Superman. But Bossy, it was almost like him being up in the air created so much torque on his stick. I mean, first of all, I'm surprised the stick didn't snap in half, because I remember the shot, but he just wristed it into the net. But it was a strong wrist shot, considering he didn't have any feet on the ice.
Yeah, to me, it was an example of Mike's determination.
Yeah.
He was determined to be a goal scorer and to be a great player. He enjoyed being mentioned in the conversation of the all-time greats, while still being humble about it. And to me, when you score a goal like that, you are just saying to yourself, "I'm scoring this damn goal, and nothing is going to stop me."
Exactly. One thing I wanted to talk about, to kind of go back to the beginning, because we both read the story that you wrote yesterday in Sunday's Newsday, and outstanding job, of course. We were actually talking about it a little bit at the opening of the show. Just how difficult was it to write that story, and how, you talked about your first meeting with Bossy and being in a diner in Long Island, which I don't even know if writers do that kind of thing anymore. They probably don't. But what do you remember about that meeting with Mike Bossy and just sitting across from him at a Long Island diner?
Well, you're really going to make me cry, because Mike was just a terrific guy, and I knew him for so long, and we kept up that friendship. And as I wrote in yesterday's Newsday, when I heard about the diagnosis, I emailed him. It was about 7:00 at night, and I was shocked. Within minutes, he replied to the email. It was a pleasure. It was a privilege watching him, in fact, grow up and mature as a hockey player and as a person. Mm-hmm. And he was just unfailingly polite, unfailingly honest. I can't remember a single incident with Mike where he said, "Pat, I had a bad game. Could we just not talk about it tonight?" I don't remember that at all. He would always be willing to talk about what he did right, what he could have done better, And he could laugh at himself. In that story I wrote in Newsday yesterday, I had remembered a game in St. Louis where the Islanders were behind 2-0, and Mike did nothing for the first two periods. I mean, just did nothing. And then he scored 2 goals he woke up and scored 2 goals in the third period. And the next day we're picking up our luggage at the carousel, and he was saying, not relevant to the game, he was just saying, when I retire, I don't think I'm going to watch hockey games. I just don't enjoy watching them. And I said, why not? You watched one for 2 periods last night.
That's a great line.
And he was able to laugh, and that was Mike. He was a very genuine person, but still a very private person.
Right.
He wasn't the kind of guy to go out for beer after practice, which a lot of guys would do. Have practice, you're done at 1:00, guys go have lunch and have a beer. Mike pretty much went straight home. He was devoted to his wife Lucy and their family, and he wasn't one to party or carouse on the road or anything like that. He's very quiet. In fact, I remember a game in L.A. which the Islanders won, and back in the 70s they weren't having a lot of success in L.A. Going to the West Coast. They just did poorly on those road trips, and they won a game in L.A., and I remember Drew Druin saying to Mike and Brian Trottier, who were always stuck together, "Come on, boys, we're going to celebrate. I'll buy you a glass of milk."
Well, speaking of Trottier, Bossy played with Trottier and Gillies. How important was the other two guys to Mike's playing? Because to me, it's one of the great lines ever. Each person brought something special to the table. They all could score, but Bossy was the guy who got the most goals. But how do those three guys together bond and make that great line that they had?
Well, they each brought elements. Clark, his toughness, power forward. Brian, his playmaking ability. And Mike, his just ability to put the puck in the smallest of spaces into the net. The one thing I will say is, people always say, "Oh, well, what an advantage he had playing with Trottier and Gillies," and certainly that's true. But Mike made them better players too.
Oh yeah.
So and Mike, people focus on his goal scoring ability as well. They should, but Mike was a very smart, intelligent, instinctive player, and people forget that. He was not a defensive liability. Was he a great checking forward? Of course not. That wasn't his role. But he was not a defensive liability, and he worked to make sure that he would not be a defensive liability. And so they all complemented each other exceedingly well. And, of course, it was said that we lost Clark in January.
Right.
And Mike just this week. But those were great times, and that was a great, great line.
Well, it seemed like, one of the things about, Gillies, if you went too close to Bossy, he was going to make sure he paid you a visit also. It was I thought, a great protection, and that allowed Mike to focus more on scoring. Though, like I said, they all could score.
Oh, well, there's no question about that. I remember Dave Hoyda slammed Bossy into the net. It was actually a blindside cross-check at a game at the Coliseum. And Gillies went right after Hoyda. And if you look at the clip of it, some Flyers are trying to get in the way of Gillies getting to Hoyda, and Clark is just brushing them off like he's brushing a crumb off his sleeve. And he got to Hoyda, and he just beat the hell out of him, and that precipitated a major, major brawl. But certainly Clark had Mike's back.
We're talking with Pat Calabria. He, of course, was the Islanders beat writer during the dynasty years of the New York Islanders for Newsday. Yesterday's Newsday had a great tribute to Mike Bossy, who we're talking about, from Pat. And my question for you is, we know about Mike Bossy's back. He's in pain a lot. But looking at his stats, except for the last season where he played 63 games and 83-84, which was sort of an injury year for the Islanders. He basically played a full season each year. So when we talk about his back, how hard was the pain on him, I should say? Well, how painful was it for him to play with his back problems? And did he just ignore it for all these times and finally it just caught up to him? What was the deal with his back?
I don't think he ignored it. I think he dealt with it. Okay, but it became progressively worse to the point where, he had that season where he played only 63 games and scored 38 goals, which, by the way, is still projects to 50 goals.
Right.
Okay, and then he took the entire season off, and no one knew at that time if he would ever come back, and of course he did not. And Mike was not the kind of person who would want to come back and be somewhat ordinary. He was not going to come back. Knowing Mike the way I did, he was not going to come back and say, okay, I'll come back and I'll earn my nice salary, and if I score 31 goals, then I score 31 goals, and that'll be fine. He wanted to be Mike Bossy all the time, or he was not going to be play.
And 31 goals would have been good.
Yeah. but to be Mike Bossy meant to score at least 50.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And remember, he has the highest scoring goal percentage per game than anybody in history. And I do agree with the statement someone made recently that if Mike had played 15 or 17 or 19 years like guys are playing now, that he would have the goal scoring record, not anybody else.
Yeah, I certainly would agree with that. I mean, like you said, when you look at the numbers, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was what is it, something like .785 goals per game.
Yeah,
I mean, it's obscene how many goals he scored.
Yes, and to score 7 goals in 4 games in a Stanley Cup final.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
That's winning single-handed. Yeah, hey, I'm going to hit you with one of my pet peeves here, Pat, because I'm going to ask you to describe Mike Bossy as a player for somebody who never got to see him play. But here's my pet peeve, is that when people talk about somebody who was as good as Mike Bossy was, and they talk about him being a natural, that to me diminishes the amount of work that somebody has to put in to make it look so easy. So how would you describe Bossy as just as a player?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, Mike had natural ability that he was born with. He had great instincts, but he certainly worked hard to be as good as he could be. And he put up with a lot. I mean, this was the age where players like Mike Bossy were not protected by the rules.
No.
When players were allowed to run at them and hack them and whack them. And he put up with that and still managed to not only be good, but to excel. And that took a determination and hard work that you're correct that people kind of overlook, because what they see is that flash of brilliance, that quickness, that, on the puck and boom, it's in the net kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do agree with you. Mike worked hard. He put up with a lot. People ran him, whacked him, tried to intimidate him, and he excelled nonetheless.
Yeah, and we talked a minute ago about Gillies being a protector, but Trottier was too, to a certain extent. I mean, Brian, the good thing about Trottier for me was always that he was a guy who could handle himself, and they didn't necessarily. Well, obviously, the Islanders didn't want him getting into fights to have to defend himself, but the way he was built and the way he played the game, he was going to lay out, lay the wood, so to speak, as much as anybody else was going to. So it almost kind of was like having two protectors for Bossy.
Well, Brian was built like a fire hydrant.
Yeah.
He was a strong guy. But really the whole team played on the edge. I wouldn't say the Islanders were a dirty team, although some other teams accused them of being a little dirty. But I would say they played on the edge, which, good teams do. I mean, you just, you're gonna hit people hard, and if one of those hits results in a penalty, so be it. But they played on the edge. They were not afraid to check. They were not afraid to, use the stick a little. Then he'd butt in somebody every once in a while to keep him away from the net. They cleared the defenseman cleared the front of that net pretty well. Billy Smith, certainly scared people by wielding his stick. So they played on the edge. I wouldn't.
Don't forget about Bobby Nystrom.
Bobby Nystrom, really tough guy.
Gary
I would
Howard
not say
too,
they would. Yeah, I would not say they were a dirty team, but I would say they played right on the edge.
Yeah, and back then that was how the game was played. I mean, and not only that, but to me, one of the signatures of those Islanders teams was there. It wasn't just one way that they could beat you, and that's what made them such a devastating force for especially those 4 years. Was they could beat you a number of different ways.
Yeah, you wanted to skate, they would outskate you. They had guys who could really skate. Bobby Bourne certainly, comes to mind. He was the fastest skater on the team. You wanted to have a high-scoring game. Fine, they led the league in goals. You wanted to have a tight defensive game. They beat you that way. You wanted to fight. Well, beginning in 1980, with that series against the Boston Bruins. They were going to stand up for themselves, and they were going to outpunch you. That's what it took.
The one of the more famous stories about Mike Bossy was happened before he even played a game in the NHL during those contract negotiations. I got to ask you, because it almost seems like this has become a myth as much as anything, but did Mike Bossy actually say to Bill Torrey, "I'm going to score 50 goals as a rookie"?
Yeah, he did.
It's a very audacious kind of statement.
Yeah. Well, Bill was a tough negotiator, and Mike had been overlooked by a number of teams. His goal scoring ability was without question, but other teams doubted his ability to play a complete game. The Rangers passed on him twice. I believe it was the Maple Leafs who also passed on him twice in the first round, and the Islanders actually were considering a checking forward named Dwight Foster, who went to Boston, I think, with the next pick. Mm-hmm. And they were sitting around the table at the draft, and it was Al Arbor who said, "Let's go for the home run hitter," because Al and Bill as well knew that they needed somebody who could put the puck in the net to really get the team to the next level. They hadn't had that kind of scorer ever.
Right.
And so they went for the home run hitter. But because Mike went lower in the draft, I remember it was 15th, I guess.
Yeah, 15th.
Bill was going to, be a tough negotiator, and I believe it was Mike's agent who kind of prodded Mike and said, tell him what you're going to do. And Mike just said, I'm going to score 50. I think that was audacious, but I also think it was just a negotiation, because when I sat down with Mike at training camp, he said, I'm not going to burn up the league right away. And I think he was very sincere in that, he was going to, just have to acclimate himself to the league, and he was not going to be a star right off the bat. Of course.
Except he was.
Except it was a few times he was wrong.
Scored 53 goals as a rookie.
Yeah.
I'd say you're setting the league on fire. I mean, that's the one thing for me is that 14 teams passed on this guy, and I was actually talking to a friend of mine who's a Buffalo Sabres fan, and that was I don't even remember I don't remember who he said the Sabres picked, but he said yeah we went for a checker. And I'm like, how do you pass on Mike Bossy for somebody who checks?
Well, it's a more physical time too. That's I think part of it.
Yes, it tells you about the time of teams what they were looking for. And Mike had gotten this reputation, which obviously was not well deserved, of being a guy who, he would score goals, that's fine, but he wouldn't do anything else. Well, that turned out to be, untrue. And I will tell you that Mario Saraceno, who was the Islanders' Quebec scout at the time, and a lovely, lovely man, he actually brought a picture of Mike Bossy to the draft and put it in front of Bill Torrey and Al Arbor, and it was his way of saying, you got to draft this guy if he's there. He's got to draft him.
Put it down on the table. This is our guy.
Yeah, this is our guy, and again, I give Al a lot of credit because Al, people thought of him as the defensive genius, which he was, but he was enough of a hockey man and had a hockey sense and a hockey brain to say, what we need is somebody who can put the puck in the net. We got enough guys who can play defense and check.
Right. Go ahead.
And that was the line. He said, "Let's go for the home run hitter."
Right.
My question with that, though, I mean, Al must have figured I can teach him defense. Like, I can get through to this guy. This is what I know, and we can make this guy a complete player. Like, we know he can score because all you had to do was look at the numbers from the Quebec Major Junior League. But I'm sure Al probably felt it, or I don't know if he ever said it, but that we can teach this guy to play defense, or enough defense anyway.
What Al felt was, we need someone who can put the puck in the net, and I'll get him to a point where he'll be fine.
Yeah,
that's what Al felt.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody who ever knew Al Arbor and was around that team knew that Al was the boss. It's not like today where coaches are afraid to call out players. They're coddled. And Al was the boss. And if Al felt that you weren't doing something, he would get you to a point that was acceptable. He knew that Mike's ability was to score goals. He didn't want to take away from that ability to try and make Mike a defensive, star. That was not going to happen, and that would have not been good for the team. What was good for the team was Mike Bossy scoring goals and getting his all-around play up to a level that was acceptable.
Right.
What's amazing about Mike Bossy, I'm looking at some stats here. 44 hat tricks if you include postseason, but 39 otherwise. He had 5 in postseason. That's an incredible amount of hat tricks for a player over 10 years. That's a lot.
There's some season ticket holders at the Coliseum who wound up throwing a lot of hats on the ice.
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. I feel about Mike Bossy the way I feel about Mickey Mantle. And I tell people, if you never saw Mantle play, then don't tell me this guy that you saw last week on TV is the greatest, okay? And if you never saw Mike Bossy play, don't tell me somebody else is the greatest. Okay, you had to see Mantle, and you had to see Mike Bossy.
That's so true because we're both Islander fans. Grow up with the the dynasty years. We got to see it firsthand about not just Mike Bossy but the whole thing. When they made the trade for Butch Gord, and all of a sudden they move up a step, and just watching Bossy. Just who didn't want to be Mike Bossy playing street hockey? That's the best way to remember him. Just he was the guy that you wanted to be, but Trottier was too. And then you have there was a lot of popular guys on this team. Nystrom, because everyone wanted to fight, but Bossy was one who scored.
Nystrom's hair, which he doesn't have anymore. But.
Yeah, but Bossy was the one who scored so much. So
and a gracious, honest, nice person.
Yeah, gentleman.
Well, I one time in 1982, he lived up at the Hamlet on the North Shore there, sort of North Shore. And I was working for a landscaper, and the guy who was our boss is a big hockey guy. And we knew Bossy lived there. And so one day he saw Bossy leaving, and he actually went up to him and introduced himself. And Bossy talked to him for like 25 minutes. And it was like, wow. There's Mike Bossy talking in his house while landscapers are blowing dirt around. And we were just like, wow, it was just amazing. So,
Mike would do that.
Yeah, he just took the time out. And Any other memories before we have to close out this interview? It's been a great interview, Pat.
Well, the one I remember, because I still have it, of course, is, I covered the 1981 All-Star Game in L.A., and Mike and I were on the flight back to wherever we're going. I don't know if we're going back to New York or going to the next game. And he just pulled out his All-Star jersey, and he said, "Here." And he gifted me his All-Star jersey, which I still have.
Wow.
And, it was his way of... He didn't say, "And thanks for all the good things you've written." He didn't need to. I mean, like I tell people, what else was going to write about Mike Bossy? That he was a bum? It was just his way quietly of showing appreciation.
Yeah, I mean that's. I was going to ask you about that, but I decided not to because, athletes a lot of times don't necessarily understand that criticism comes with being a sports writer. I mean, there's sometimes that you're going to have to write something that they might not like. But like you just said, I mean, there weren't that many opportunities to write bad things about Mike Bossy or those Islanders teams. I mean, they won so much. And they were so good at what they did. I mean, you'd almost really have to dig to find something negative to write about them.
Yeah, yeah. And the greatest compliment that I ever got paid, and I heard it from a number of times, guys always said, "We trust you because you're fair."
Right.
And so that's all I wanted to be, was fair. And I think that's why I was able to develop good relationships with people like Mike Bossy. And I will tell you, the death of Clark Gillies and the death of Mike Bossy, hit me kind of hard because, as did the deaths of Alan Bill, because, it reminded me of an era which I enjoyed so much when I was quite young.
Mm. Yeah, it's just, it's, I don't want to say the players are starting to fade away, but we all get older. So, it was a great time. And one thing from when I'm a collector of air checks and stuff, a lot of games are saved on videotape somewhere. So hopefully maybe some people start putting more. The NHL Network had a bunch of the Stanley Cup games last year, which was a nice thing.
I know. I was watching them, and actually, as I was watching the clinching game against Philadelphia in overtime, Lorne Henning had a great third period and assisted on the winning goal. And I actually texted him, and I said, "Lorne, I'm watching the game. You're having a great third period."
Well, he did actually, and that's still embedded in our brains. But Mike Bossy had some great playoff games too as a scorer. So everyone remembers Nystrom scoring, but Bossy had a lot of goals in those playoffs. Stickle. Yeah, Pat Calabria, thank you for joining us and remembering Mike Bossy. Some good stuff there. Appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Pat.
You've been listening to 90.3 WHPC. From the press box, I'm Rob Leonard. He is Tim Leonard. Thank you to Big Ed for letting us go over a little bit. Coming up next is Big Ed with the Good Gold Show. If you like the oldies that they don't play anymore on the radio, Big Ed's the guy. Actually, some of the songs they might actually still play on the radio, because that would imply that Ed only plays obscure stuff. He plays the big hits, too, because he's Big Ed. He's not Small Ed, and he doesn't play the small hits. So just please remember that. So thank you for listening. This will become a podcast later on. Take care and bye-bye.